a historian only learns what the last historian wrote, and he educates himself on the last book or last, and so it just keeps repeating. But no one ever really understands until the Choctaw himself tells his own story.
My name is Jason Lewis, and I'm Oklahoma Choctaw.
My name is Courtney Jimmy. I'm 36. I've lived on
Mississippi,
My name is Adrienne Tubby. I'm 28, and I work
My name is
with
Mindy
Choctaw
Goodman. I'm 24 years old, and I'm a member of the
My name is Ross Green. I'm 27 years old, and I am a member of the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. I also work in their Cultural Services Department.
My name is Ryan Springs. I'm 28 years old, and I'm the Director and GIS GPS Specialist for the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma Historic Preservation.
I was born on the reservation in Mississippi. My first contact with storytelling was from my grandmother.
I was exposed to a lot of books like published authors when I was young.
All of my family are storytellers, and because that's how they say they pass on the language through storytelling.
Stories are the cornerstone of teaching what it means to be Choctaw.
I grew up hearing a lot of the scary stories.
Whenever I was little, the first story I remember learning was about our creation, and that's because
And there's many different
my grandmother
origin
was
stories.
like
And
seriously
some of the origin
religious.
stories people think conflict, but that's the beauty of oral tradition, is time is not always relevant in these stories. Two brothers, Choctaw and Chickasaw, took this group, but they didn't know which direction to go.
And every night they would have this sacred pole that they would put in the ground.
And they would go to bed. In the night, the Creator would push that pole in the direction that the people were supposed to go. When the Hopai struck the pole into the ground and Choctaw and the Hopai went to go look at it,
The sacred pole stood up straight, and this is where they had decided to live.
this was the Creator telling them that you've now found your homeland. This is the new land where you'll prosper. And then later on, to honor the Creator, they built Nanewaya, which is the sacred mound of the Choctaw people in Mississippi. It's in Winston County, Mississippi today.
Our stories are descriptive, and it's always associated with nature and the things that we're comfortable with. And so I never heard of an European story like you mentioned, Hansel and Gretel, until I went to school. And I found it strange, because the way we tell stories and the way they tell it was totally different.
It's harder for me to know that my culture is unique, and it's special, and maybe only 10,000 people in the world can actually understand it in this way.
When we're telling stories in Choctaw, they're funny, and the way the gestures we use or the words we use, as far as when you try to tell it in English, it's kind of like, that's not funny.
In Choctaw storytelling, there's always that little sense of humor.
When people are joking with you or when they're making fun of you, that's when you're in the crowd. Like, you've made it.
We love to laugh. If we're not laughing around you, that probably means we don't like you.
One story that I really, really like that kind of changed my whole perspective has to do with just a man who speaks Choctaw to his dog. His dog is only fluent in Choctaw. And actually knowing who that person is and knowing when he told that story and who he was telling that story to, it was a part of him wanting to motivate young people to know that if my dog can listen and understand Choctaw, then you can too. That in itself kind of changed my whole perspective of the world.
I have a 6-year-old niece who's made the comments about her skin being too dark. She's made the comments about her hair being ugly and stuff like that because, she's really into YouTube, and she watches all the little white girls saying, "Hi, this is whatever, this is my doll, I'm gonna talk about it today." It's hard to explain it to her because I want to yell and be like, "No, don't do that. You're Choctaw, don't obsess over something you can't change about yourself. That doesn't make anybody better than anyone."
We've gotten phone calls before that people want to see us and, we'll dress up like Indians, and then the cowboys will come through and shoot you all down. And it's like,
That's why people look at us the way they do. They think we put our ear to the ground and track somebody. I'm like, that's not a real Indian. but that's what they think.
Others have told me, they asked us if we still live in teepees. And I said, oh, I've never come across that.
I remember getting into a discussion with a teacher once, a white teacher, over, I think it was the Peter Pan movie, the, What Makes a Red Man Red movie. And I made the point that it was damaging and it was not good for really anybody to watch. But his rebuttal was that, well, I work with ethnic children. He said that my kids love it. I put it on. They love it. And I said, well, we have slim pickings. So, of course they're going to love like that one thing that looks like them. That's all there is. And we have to grasp, sometimes we feel like we have to grasp onto whatever we can get.
American society likes to kind of talk about how we've been assimilated. And that's something that the U.S. government wanted to do at one time, is they wanted to assimilate us. They wanted to eliminate our culture, kill the Indian, save the man, and create, good, God-fearing Americans. There's a lot of parts of Choctaw culture that have been damaged by that, and even lost.
I grew up on the reservation, and I feel like Choctaw has been something that's always existed around me. My parents were fluent speakers, my grandparents were fluent speakers, but for me, it was just something that was on the perimeter, I guess. Beyond commands, I wasn't involved.
I don't play stickball. I've never played a drum. I can't sew a Choctaw shirt or anything like that. And so the language is all I have.
In Oklahoma, the Choctaws are scattered out. There's no cohesiveness because of the distance. But on the reservation, they could maintain the culture because they could utilize it every day.
When you don't have your people or your culture around you, you lose face. You adapt to your surroundings.
In the past, there were elders who were revered for their storytelling skills, and that also made time to be available to tell stories as a part of the culture of communities. And this is not something I've ever witnessed, but I've definitely heard people talk about it, and I've also heard people say that doesn't happen anymore.
The way that history was taught is through repetition, repetition, repetition. With oral tradition, since it's not being written down, you can't just study it, you just have to hear it over and over and over and over. Anytime the men got together to talk about anything, there would be some sort of elder that would stand up and he would recite the history of the whole community from start to finish.
I want to tell you a story about stickball, not the game itself, because that would take too long. When the warrior who's going to be playing this game of stickball, he would go out into the woods and he would cut down a hickory stick and come back, and he would begin to whittle it.
Every story that disappears, we're actually losing
makes
words,
it to fit his
names
hand,
of trees and
because
plants.
he's the one that's going to play with it.
If they're not telling how to make the stickball sticks in Choctaw anymore, then they're not passing on the word for hickory, and they're not passing on the word for the tools that they used. And then the kids don't know how to say hickory tree in Choctaw. So even if a story is being told still, but it's not being told in the language, it has an impact.
In the 1830s, we were the first tribe to be removed under the Indian Removal Act. Communities were split, families were split. For the 15,000 Choctaws that did move on the removal, 30% of them passed away. Who are the people that pass away first in those kind of circumstances? It's your very young, and it's your elders. Your elders are your keepers of your oral tradition, of your oral history. And that's where I think we lost a lot of our oral stories, is right there in those few years.
That experience of being displaced from your homeland has an impact that goes on for generations.
I think we all know good storytellers, but the term storyteller feels so loaded that people are apprehensive. And that would be really scary to sit in front of a camera and tell a story and say, I'm a Choctaw storyteller. I don't know, it's a big title to put on yourself.
I don't believe the stories, so that's hard for me to say that they are important. And they should be taught to our children, but less of a moral guideline and more of like, oh, this is what your grandmother believed, or this is what your people believed.
They're not just stories for some people. These are, for me personally, the creation story that I just talked about, that is my equivalent of your Judeo-Christian Adam and Eve story. I mean, to me, this story is the story that's been passed down for 12,000 years of how Choctaw people were created. You know, that's my story about how my ancestors came to be.
Well, my belief in preserving the Choctaw story is like it always have been, is to be passed from person to person, to be believed in, and to exercise the concepts that are within the story.
How do you start re-educating your people in a traditional way?
If there are people that still know some stories, how do they have access to people who listen, and how do young people really get access to people who are going to tell them stories?
My belief is that if I want to preserve something, if I want to keep it alive, even if it's a small degree, there has to be some change.
I think in the next 10 years we need to see like more people from my generation getting involved with the government aspect. My generation doesn't really seem that interested in it.
The tribe has been looking at building a cultural center to act as a keeping place for our history and for our culture. If you really want to immerse yourself in learning history and culture, you have to physically be there.
The best way to teach, in my own opinion, is to get out there and just do it.
That's the question. Is it important to be relatable?
If I go to a kindergarten class today and tell about how the turtle got the cracks on the shell, they look at me kind of odd.
With the digital age and technology and everything at your fingertips, if you want to learn something, you just look it up.
I see a lot of people trying to write in Choctaw on Facebook, and they talk. Some make videos and send it to each other. Even texting. Sometimes my son texts me in Choctaw.
Digital media and other ways that kids can get access, because we know everybody knows how to get online for the most part, and they usually have an iPad or a phone, something like that. I mean, they have to be available in that way now, because that's just how so many people access knowledge these days.
If you're passing on a tradition, a recorded video isn't going to do it. It's not the same as if it's in person.
Sometimes traditional people think that we're violating trust.
We're not a static people. Our culture evolves through time, just like all cultures. We're human beings. All cultures evolve. All cultures adapt and change.
You'll notice that Choctaw Stories doesn't have a complete ending. It's like it's got a cliffhanger. It just leaves for your imagination. We move on, but somewhere deep in our being, we know who we are.
Himanaka etapishi toglo emukla ila wilicha ukla kane mama ya kunush eskolito iti ukla yakni anoka hilicha ugia ero mugla nostani malugla nahini makane mago iti madhikia ma ukla eskolito ito shulai ito shulani waya ukla iti maratbisa tegiana ukla maya chesh makachicha Aku ada gelas itu, aku ada cerita, pasti kali